In the learning plan, it talks about creating the virtual machine. It gives you some of the steps here, just kind of an outline. I'm going to walk you through a little bit more thoroughly. You may have created virtual machines before, but here's just a quick review. So just kind of watch along first and take some notes. Don't try to do it at the exact same time. It might be hard to keep up. So first of all, I want to make sure that I have my virtual machine files. So underneath my ISO files, I'm looking at installing Windows 10. So I have Windows 10 over here. I'm going to be running VMware Workstation. It's going to be this icon. And I'm going to create a new virtual machine. I like using the menus a lot of times. I really don't need the library, so a lot of times I'll close that. I'll just go File, New Virtual Machine. I choose Advanced, even though there's many times I don't change any features in there, kind of like installing other software before. But it's nice seeing what the options are under there. It gives you a little bit more in-depth understanding of the hardware that it's creating for this virtual machine. So I'm going to choose Custom. And then it gives hardware compatibility version. It'd be equivalent to, like, am I using Word 2012 or Word 2008? It's just how the data is being written into the data files. It does give you more features, the higher levels that you have. But if somebody's running an older version of VMware Workstation, you might have to save it in a previous version so they could run it. We have Workstation 12 here, and you can take it at home. So we're just going to use the latest and greatest version and click Next. It seems like we want to install the operating system right away, but we really don't. In every case that we work in class, we will always be, in all the classes that I teach, we'll always be installing the operating system later. I want it to be a very clear distinction between the software builds the hardware environment. And once you have the hardware environment, then you install the operating system on top of it. VMware is very, very smart, and they can sort of integrate the two processes together. It's very hard to perceive, and it actually takes away some of the features that we need, especially with running with evaluation versions. It's going to ask all the questions up front, including your product key, and we just don't have that for evaluation versions. Other software that we run later on, it just does not install properly. So we want to get the hardware in place and then install the operating system on top of it. So we'll always be choosing I'll install the operating system later. This now is like going into a computer store and you're saying, what are you going to buy? Well, tell me what operating system you're going to install, and then I'll give you recommendations as far as which hardware to include. This is just going to be a recommendation list. This does not stop you or force you to lock anything into here. I could say that I'm going to install Solaris on it and then come back later and install Windows 10. It just means the suggested hardware throughout the list is going to suggest it towards a Solaris installation. So we try to be as close as possible. So we're going to choose Microsoft, and then we're going to choose Windows 10. Windows 10 is only a 64-bit option, and so that's why we have the 10x64. Again, if you chose wrong, it's not going to make a big deal difference. You can modify any of the hardware later on as well. This is a really, really important screen. This is the most important screen in the entire installation, and that's because it defaults to locating it on your local C drive. Many of you ran into this in class already. My C drive is full, and that's because somebody missed this screen, and now you're putting a 5, 10, 20, 30 gigabyte data file on your local C drive. Well, a couple things about that. You have a very small hard drives for the classroom, so we don't want to fill it up there. The second thing is you go home, you take your portable drive home, you plug it in, you can't access it because it's not there. It's sitting at school still. So make sure that you're going to point to it on your portable drive. I'm going to name it first, and in this case, I'm telling you what to name it. I'm going to call it Win10-1. This is just the virtual machine name. This is not the computer name. Like within Windows, we're going to change that later on. But right now, it's just the virtual machine name. So VMware is going to see this as Windows 10-1. The location is going to be your portable drive. So if I click on this PC, I'm going to see my drive down here. Now, right now, I just have my ISO files and my individual files. I want to create another folder for this class, first of all. So I'm going to make a new folder for Server Admin 1. And since I have two sections, I'm going to call it Mondays. And then make sure that that's selected. And then under Server Admin 1 Mondays, I'm going to make another new folder called Win10-1. So I like making a folder specifically for each virtual machine. So all the rest of my virtual machines for Server Admin 1 will go underneath Server Admin 1, but they'll all be in their own folder. Not particularly horrible if you mess up this or rename it, whatever. They know which files get connected with what. It's just not going to be easy for you to manage things. So later on, if I want to get rid of Windows 10-1, I should be able to just go to that one folder, delete the whole folder, and the whole computer disappears, and I can recreate it from scratch. So I created one for the class, a folder for the class, and I created a folder for the operating system itself. Go ahead and click OK. I double, triple, quadruple check. Make sure that this does not say C. Ideally, it's going to have some kind of meaningful path after that, but the most important thing is that it doesn't say C. So this is the configuration I have for here. Go ahead and click Next. This is the firmware. Do you want it to boot up in EFI or BIOS? We're going to keep BIOS. That's going to be fine. And now it's going to suggest that you use one processor. You can go up to more. You can go up to 16 processors. We're not going to do that, but just choosing one processor is really all we need. And it says you're running Windows 10, so we recommend, I'm just giving you a hardware recommendation, is 2 gigs of memory. And that really is pretty good. If you wanted to, just for the time being, just to give it extra memory during the install, you certainly can. Then you can come back later and pull some memory out. To change memory, you can either type it in here, you can use little arrows going up and down here, or you just click on the little bar here to bring you up to 1 gig, 2 gigs, 4 gigs. As you can see, you can go up to, 28 gigs of RAM. That would be a lot of RAM for Windows 10. So I'll use 4 gigs for today. This is a network connection. What are you going to be connecting with? And I don't want to get super deep into this, but if you remember going back under the virtual network editor, the NATing setup is the one that we were configuring. That's where we want to be. This is going to make our environment be kind of like your home. It's your own private network, and everybody's going to be in the 192, 168, 118 network. It has DHCP built into it, so you're going to automatically get an address in that range, but it's just our little private world to work with. And so we're going to use a network address translation network. So we click Next on there. The next several screens are going to be kind of just leaving the defaults. Our I/O controllers, how do we do input and output. LSI, logic, SAS is recommended, so we'll just keep it. Interestingly, we don't use SCSI much anymore, but they still recommend a SCSI drive on here. You can throw in an IDE drive if you want. And if you want to be really, I guess, as accurate as you can about it, we could switch this to SATA because most likely we'll be putting SATA drives. We're not working on the drive level. We really don't care. It's just a place to put our operating system and boot. Possibly when we're working like in our Windows class, we might be working with specifically SATA. So it's a SATA drive in there instead of instead of a SCSI drive. But they recommend it. We'll just leave it there. That's not the important part of this class. Now it's going to ask you, so okay, you want a disk. What kind of disk do you want? We can create a new virtual disk, and that's what we want to do. We could also use an existing virtual disk. So if you already had one created for another computer, it'd be kind of like if I go to the store and buy a new piece of hardware, new processor, new RAM, I could use my existing hard drive from my existing computer and put it in there and have it run that way. And you can do the same thing with virtual machines. What's even nicer about virtual machines is if I took that drive out of a computer at home, it may or may not boot to my new hardware, because my new hardware might not be compatible enough. That's going to have a different processor. Maybe I went from Intel to AMD or whatever. Virtual world, they're all the same. Every piece of hardware in the VMware workstation world are identical. So I can feel free to move my operating system hard drive to any virtual machine that I want because they're all using the same hardware. Or you can actually use a physical disk. I'm going to say no. I'm using a physical disk. So it doesn't have to be a virtual disk. You could put a real live drive and run off of there. So there's some neat things that you can do. We're going to keep it as just creating a new virtual disk. That way it's a nice package that I can move around and do what I want and keep everything all contained. Clicking next, how big of a disk do you want to make? And it defaults is saying you have Windows 10, you really only need 60 gig drive. One thing about drives in the virtual world on VMware Workstation, on the desktop side of things, it doesn't allocate all that size. All it's saying is that when I look in Windows, it's going to say, here's a 60 gig drive. But in reality, it's really nothing. It's a couple hundred bytes. And as I need it, it'll expand the file. On servers, on the other hand, typically you allocate all the space because it's more efficient. It's faster or whatever. You have the option of doing that. That's what this is for allocate all the space now. I would not recommend that because I don't want to take up 60 gigs for every virtual machine I put out there. I would not have enough disk space on these portable drives. So we're going to just let it expand as it needs to. It also, by default, this is one thing I do change. By default, it splits it into multiple files. It splits them into 2 gig files. So it's going to make 30 2 gig files in this case, and they're all going to be teeny tiny, nothing in them. But it's going to make a bunch of little files. The advantage of that is that they can be then used on a FAT32 environment. So if your drive is FAT32, it only goes up to 2 gigs or 4 gig files, and so it couldn't support a 60 gig file. I will put it, since we're using exFAT or NTFS, either case, you can have a 60 gig or 100 gig file. So to make things a little bit more efficient, we're going to put that as a single file. You can upgrade this, saying, wow, I really want a 100 gig drive in there. That's fine as well. It's still going to be the same small file size until it needs that file, then it's going to just keep growing. For now, I guess I'll just leave the default of 60, but realize that you're really not taking up any more disk space. Clicking next. Okay, what's the name of the file? It all ends on VMDK, virtual machine disk file, and it names it the same as your virtual machine. But again, you can use that for other virtual machines later on, and just leave the default there. And then go ahead and click Finish. Now this is the hardware that we created. So I have 4 gigs of memory, 1 processor, 60 gig hard drive, I have a CD-ROM drive, a network adapter, USB controller, sound card, a printer, and I have my video card built into there. Now I want to install an operating system. How would you install an operating system on a physical computer? Put in the disk. So we're going to do that, except in a virtual world. So we're going to click on our disks to more or less eject the disk. And when I do that, it gives me the connection. So right now I could put in a physical disk and it would boot to it. I don't have a physical disk of Windows 10 though, but I do have an ISO file, and that's where this option over here comes in, is use an ISO image. So I'm going to browse for this, and I'm going to find my H drive, and then go to my ISO files, and I'm going to choose Windows 10. And this is my enterprise evaluation. If it doesn't say enterprise evaluation or 90-day evaluation, then you have the full copy, and it's going to require a product key at the end. So make sure that actually you're using the actual evaluation copy. Clicking on Open and OK. Now that's in my computer. Now I'm going to boot to my computer. So I'm going to power on the virtual machine. And while this is booting, I'll show you a couple of options here. One thing is I like being in full screen because right now I still have these menus down here. That's on my physical machine. That's going to get me confused as far as where I am. Also, I'm not seeing the full screen, so I have to scroll up and down, and I don't necessarily like that. So really good key combination is Control-Alt-Enter, and that's going to bring you into full screen mode. In addition, I even like taking rid of this bar across the top because that can be distracting. There's a little pin up the top, and if I push the pin, it goes away. I can always get back to that by hitting the, by just arrowing up there, and it shows me that bar. To get back out, I do Control-Alt-Enter again, and brings me to full screen mode. This then goes to a standard version of Windows. This is just like a physical machine. Windows at this point does not know that it's running in a virtual world. It just says, I have a processor, I have a hard drive, I have memory, what more could I want? Let me install myself. I click Install, and I click Install Now. I'd read through the license agreement. accept the license agreement and I click next. This is still pretty confusing. The default is to upgrade Windows. I don't have Windows here, so I need to do a clean install. And the clean install is it's listed as advanced. It sounds like, oh, that's a scary thing to do. I'm installing Windows. It's a base clean install, but that's what I'm looking at doing because it's a new system. Fortunately, I have one drive here. Some computers come with multiple drives, so you'd have to like figure out which drive you're going to install to. I only have one, so I just click next, and I'm going to let it do its install. So I'm going to pause it here for a second. So after you're done, it's going to reboot, possibly even a couple times. We eventually are going to get to this screen. Now, there are different versions of Windows 10 out there, and these next screens could be different on which evaluation copy you get or updates or whatever. So realize, again, go for concepts, not for specific steps. But we don't want to use the express settings. Microsoft just kind of wants to do its own thing, and we want to not do those things. So we're going to customize them. And pretty much, we're going to say no to everything. Personalize your speech, typing, and inking input by sending your input data to Microsoft. Not really interested. This is a server class. I'm really not looking at optimizing my Windows experience. I just want something to log on to a server. So I'm turning all these things off. Let Skype. I don't even want Skype on here. And turn on Find My Device. And one thing is a virtual machine, so we don't really care. And I don't want it to find my device. So I'm going to click next. Automatically send stuff, connect to hotspots, and send data usage to Microsoft. No, I'm going to turn all those off. Browser protection and updates. Nope, I don't want page prediction. I don't want to send my updates to other computers on the internet. And again, the different versions of Windows, they're going to have different screens on there. I didn't come across it on this one, but other ones, you had to scroll up and down sometimes to catch all of them. Because it looks like the end of the page, all of a sudden there's like 2 or 3 items on the bottom. So scroll through all of them and kind of read through them. Who's going to use this computer? We're going to use a very generic login. And it's going to be starting with, it's going to be student is the username. And then student is going to be, actually I don't think I can do student on here. I'll try it. I guess you can. It doesn't require a complex password, so I'm just have student and then student. One thing it doesn't let you do though is, hey, what's the hint? You can't type student though, because your password hint can contain your password. But you can say things like same as username. So my username is student, and my password is student as well. We're not looking at making this a really secure environment. It's just a client. We're going to be joining a domain later on, so you're going to be forced along the network as well. We're not going to use Cortana. Again, it's just a generic client, so click Not Now. And it's going to build your initial profile. If you have a physical hard drive, this is another area that you're going to see it slower. Solid state will make a big difference on this one. But it's going to create an initial profile. So everything about you and that user student, that whole environment's creating right now. Windows 7, you're super fast. Windows 8 just adds a ton of stuff to the profiles. So 8 and 10 just take a long time to create that initial profile. And every time you log in as a different person, it's looking at creating a new profile for that. So it can be time consuming. Okay, there's a couple different, again, versions of Windows 10 that's out. Windows 10 that's out there. And I guess I should have made sure I had the same version as you have. It may ask you to join a domain or some kind of local user or Azure even. You want to choose join a domain, a local domain, even though you're not going to do that. It's just the only way that you can create a user. It also may prompt you to create a Microsoft account, and you don't need that either. You don't want to create another account. So I might have to go get a different version to do, like, to show that as well. You're going to ultimately get a screen that says like skip or create an account. Did you get there then?
Yeah.
Okay. But you don't want to join. You don't want to log in with a Microsoft account, or create one or do anything on the web. You want to do everything local. So I'll try to update those last couple steps on there. But ultimately, you get inside your computer like this. A couple things we want to do from here is just like any normal computer install. Once you get the computer installed, you probably want to name the computer, so something meaningful. And so kind of get in the habit of doing that. So we're going to do that by naming it. So I'm going to right click on the start button here and go to System. And there's multiple ways of doing this. This is just one way. So right click on the button and go to System. And then on the middle it says, here's this a desktop 0NMH. Not very meaningful. For a home computer, that's going to be fine. But on a enterprise system, you really want to be taking control of the namings of these so you know what they're named. So I'm going to click to change the settings. If you notice, it's going to say, you need the elevated authentication. There's a little shield by there. Student is the administrator on these computers. That computer we're looking at right now is completely separate than my local computer. It has a different IP address. It has a different MAC address. Viruses are completely separate from each other. Data, applications, everything. It's a completely separate standalone computer. So I'm going to change the computer name by clicking on Change over here. And I'll change this to Win 10-1. It's going to help me keep track of these when I look at it on the network. I'll go ahead and click OK. It does want me to restart the computer. I'm not going to restart it right now. I'm going to restart it later on. There's something happening later on that I'll restart anyways. So I'm going to restart it. So it's not going to change the name until I have to restart it. Other things I want to do on a brand new computer is to always make sure you have the updated drivers. So you get a clean install and then you install the drivers. The hardware, this VMware hardware out here, also has drivers for its network card, for its video card, all those kinds of things. And we want to install those. And we can do it all as a package using VMware tools. So I go up to the menu up on top and I click on VM, Install VMware Tools. What this is going to do, it's going to mount it as a CD. So it's like taking that driver CD that you get from the manufacturer, plop it in, and then it's going to do, all your driver updates for you. Windows 10, you have to pay attention. It's going to have a little pop-up, say, hey, CD was installed. What are you going to do with it? If you miss it, it goes away. Prior versions of Windows, it stayed there till you hit cancel. Newer versions of Windows, it just goes away. Doesn't mean you can't do anything. It just means that you can't click the button. You have to now go to the File Explorer. So I'm going to do that by clicking on the File Explorer and then going to this PC and then going to my D drive. It's still mounted as a D drive. You just have to go through File Explorer to get there. And now it's going to launch it. It's going to do all your driver updates for you automatically. You go to VM and then install VMware tools. You have to be really careful about after you install it. It tends to put itself in the background and you just don't even know it's there. So you might have to check the taskbar. It's like, oh, it's running in the background. So make sure you bring it up. Go ahead and click next. I do want to install it. And you're going to do a typical install. It's going to install all the typical features. We don't need to do a custom on here. I click next and install. And you can see it installing different drivers. One of the most noticeable ones will be the video driver. It's going to make it a higher resolution and make it full screen, because right now it's a very generic driver. It wants to restart my computer. In this case, I do want to do it. And so now it's going to make the changes for the computer name and for the driver updates. When you come in, it has a logon screen. You have to click on it somewhere. Our password is student. That logs us back in. That's about all you need to do for the installation of the operating system itself. We're going to do a couple of extra steps outside of here, sort of a virtual machine type world type things. To turn off your computer, you turn it off just like any other computer. You go to the start button and you click the little power button and you can say shut down. You know it's shut down because you end up with the black window with all the hardware configuration on the left hand side. So the computer is turned off at this point. So doing a couple things on here. One thing I recommend doing, a really good practice, is to remove the CD-ROM drive. It just shouldn't be in there if you don't need it. So click back on the CD-ROM drive and then just put it back to physical. And just don't point it to an ISO image. It gets a little confused if the ISO image isn't where you put it before, or if you have to do something with that ISO image later on. Especially when you get to server virtualization, it's a huge issues that we run into. So just get in the practice of doing it now. If you don't need it, don't connect it. The next thing I would suggest doing is taking a snapshot. It's basically taking an entire image of the computer, but not just the operating system and applications and settings, but the hardware as well. So it takes an exact copy of everything. So I'm going to go up to VM snapshots and then take a snapshot. And I always like calling my original one just a base image. What's really, really nice about, having snapshots is now I can go into my virtual machine and I have that initial snapshot. So no matter what I do with this computer, go ahead and log in. So now that I have this computer running, I can go to like File Manager and I can say, oh, I don't know, this PC. What's the C drive thing here? Let's try formatting it. Oh, I can't format it, but I think I can like delete it maybe. Delete. That Windows folder seems to be taking up a lot of space. So, I don't know, I got some things there. System 32, maybe I can get some things underneath here. Or here's a good one. That whole registry thing, I don't know. I'm not sure what that one's for, so let me, oh, not that one. So I'm deleting some stuff.
When you saw in the VM tools, is it typical or complete set?
Typical.
Typical?
Yeah. So I'm deleting chunks of stuff out of there, but I won't delete everything, and I don't know, whatever. And maybe my display settings, whatever. And you've realized it's like, oh, that's not a good thing. So at any time you can go up to VM, go to snapshots, and I can revert back to that base image. Even to the point of changing hardware. If I added hardware, removed hardware, it puts it all back to that state. Now it's turned off, so that's the state it comes back to. But it's really nice to be able to come back to that state. As you do additional work, you can do those things, take more snapshots, go back to the beginning, go forward, go backwards, and it's really, really cool that way. Comes in handy in Minesweeper if you're just not sure where that next mine is. Take a snapshot, then guess, and then go back if you have to go back or something. So, trying to think of anything else. So, shutting down, taking a snapshot. Those are kind of the last two things. Let's take a look what the virtual machine really physically looks like. It's just a bunch of files. So if I go to my H drive, server admin, Windows 10, these are the files that are all included with it. When you're working with this virtual machine, work with it as a whole. If you're going to copy it somewhere or make a backup, just work with this folder. I'm going to back up or copy this. Don't work with the individual files. There's several lock files on here. Always make sure that VMware Workstation is closed completely before you're trying to copy it to another drive or another computer or whatever. So just kind of watch this, and then I'll close VMware Workstation. Some lock files end up disappearing, and there's some that you couldn't see as well. But this way you can make a backup of it. You can copy this to another drive, another computer, take it home with you, whatever. When you get home, you launch VMware Workstation again. Oh, wrong one. VMware Workstation. To access it, you just do a file open. Browse to it just like you would another normal text file. So server admin 1, Windows 10, Windows 10. It's also going to be a VMX file. It's the only one it's going to be showing. And you open it. And now you can run it on a different computer. Again, it is Mac PC compatible, so if you have Fusion, you do file open Windows 10, and it's going to run exactly the same on your Mac as it is on your Windows computer. Licensing wise, you cannot run a Mac operating system on a Windows PC. So you can run Windows on Mac, but not Mac on Windows on an Intel on a Windows PC. So let me power this one off, shut down. And that's how you install Windows 10 and give its initial configuration.